We have defense and trial attorney Misty Marris with us now to talk more about this. So we lay out the timeline there, Misty. What questions do Trump's comments about Epstein stealing his Mar-a-Lago employees raise, considering what we just looked through there as those years go on?
Well, of course, because there's the question really is who knew what and when. And that's the critical question that everybody wants to know with regard to Epstein. And so when this timeline is laid out and then you have that quote coupled with those other instances relating to their relationship, although nothing has been alleged, the question becomes, was anything known at the time? That is such a critical time period when it comes to Epstein. And obviously, we know we've had whiplash from what's gone on publicly here. The DOJ saying nothing to see here, no reason to even go into these files. Now to Ghislaine Maxwell sitting down for 9 hours with the Department of Justice, it begs the question, did anybody have additional information about Epstein or others who could have been involved?
Yeah, and it's also the who ignored the obvious, right? Who downplayed certain behaviors to the point where they may have been normalized. That is one of the huge questions that has come out of this whole Epstein saga. And so I guess I would ask you, Misty, you know, if someone is aware that a grown man, I mean, almost 50 at this point in time, we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein was in 2000, when Virginia Giuffre goes from the Mar-a-Lago spa to then to his illegal employee. She's 16 years old. If someone is aware that something like that is happening, you know, how might they proceed?
Absolutely. Well, there could have been at the time, and maybe even connection with civil lawsuits, something about the willful disregard of that type of conduct. From a legal perspective, there could have been liability based on those factors. And I think looking at that timeline and then fast forwarding to 2008, when Epstein scores this sweetheart deal with Florida prosecutors, that's the subject of Ghislaine Maxwell's SCOTUS application seeking to overturn her conviction. Obviously, those years are very critical. And whatever was known during that time is going to be information that's pertinent to not only Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's cases, but to the extent that others were involved. And Brianna, isn't that the point of this inquiry, right? That there's this large scale human trafficking, sex trafficking ring that involves minors. Well, obviously, if there's a conspiracy, there's other conspirators. And who are they? And what information do people have, whether or not they're involved or are just bystanders who have information that the federal government could use to bring charges? So obviously, this calls into question that time period specifically, which is the time period that was so critical with respect to Maxwell and Epstein and the cases against them.
Yeah, because from 2000 to 2005, when they are investigating, 2006, he's indicted. So many more victims, right? Pardon me. I do want to ask you, as you see lawmakers looking for documents, you know, people out there just demanding that DOJ release documents. DOJ is asking that grand jury documents be released. Does any of that, would that speak to this timeline?
Well, so the grand jury documents, and the courts have denied the applications with respect to unsealing grand jury documents. And now we learn that those grand jury documents weren't really going to contain much, which is not a surprise to me, because knowing the process, there's not going to be a whole heck of a lot of information outside of what we already saw in the indictment. So that was need to quote unquote new information that wasn't publicly available. And right now, probably the most pertinent information lies in that 9-hour meeting that was held with the DOJ, which would be memorialized in what's called a 302 document, which is when the Department of Justice conducts an interview. That's memorialized. I doubt that when that interview was conducted, that a lot of what was said wasn't already known, because remember, the DOJ has access to all of these records that the public does not. So is there an avenue where we learn more, maybe with respect to that record of the interview? If Ghislaine Maxwell were to testify before Congress, she's not going to do so unless she has immunity. No lawyer would let her do it unless she has immunity. And then, Brianna, there's a big question mark about credibility. Remember, she's spending 20 years behind bars. It would probably serve her to say whatever she needs to say if she was given immunity to get herself out of jail. And so there's, a lot of question marks about what could practically be found from any of these particular sources.
Yes, very interesting as you raise those questions. What could indeed be raised? Misty Marris, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And when we come back.